Alrighty, Camden. Hope you're having a good Sunday, buddy. Just wanted to actually kind of go into your video and compare it to Jacob deGrom, pitcher for the Texas Rangers. Really compare your mechanics to his mechanics. And then obviously kind of go into the differences that y'all do and why we do certain things. And specifically also what we talked about on Wednesday as well. So without further ado, I'm going to let these play and then we'll go into it. Alrighty, so one thing I want you to take a note of, right? So very first thing, right? We talked how you and Jacob deGrom are very similar, right? As in you're both accelerators, right? So your very first movement is going to be down the mound, right? You're not going to go down. You're going to more so go just straight to home plate, right? You're going to be using more so of gravity, right? Very first thing, right? Take a look at how high Jacob deGrom gets his leg right here, right? If you notice, right, and if you've ever wondered whenever you're watching a game and you wonder why pitchers get their leg up so high, it's to generate momentum and energy, right? Our goal, whenever we talked about it on Wednesday, our goal was output, right? We want to generate enough output, right, so that we can throw harder and we can throw better, right? That is why Jacob deGrom gets his legs so high, right? And if you also notice, his hip too, right? Whenever we talked about on Wednesday, we talked about that we want to hinge this hip right here, right? Which is also going to help whenever we continue to lift our leg up, right? So, very first thing I want to continue to work on is working on this front leg right here, right? And as well your balance, okay? So that's first thing. Second thing, you do a really good job, Camden, of separation, right? I will say you do a great job of that, right? It all flows how it's supposed to, right? Now, in terms of getting our arm where it needs to be in that bare position, that's something that's going to take time to grow on, right? And that's something that we're going to continue to continuously work, right? And we're going to really go into it a little bit more in depth on Wednesday as well and really focus on that, right? But one thing I will say that you do a great job, Camden, of that a lot of young pitchers your age don't do a good job of is really understanding that your body is a chain, right? Think about it like your body is like a bicycle, right? The only way for that bicycle to move is obviously, number one, for us to pedal it, right? Which is how we get momentum. But secondly, it's also the chain, right? There's no broken parts to that chain, right? It moves in one continuous motion, right? So if we take a look at all your mechanics, right, everything goes together, right? There's nothing that I would say is broken up about your mechanics, okay? So that's the very first thing that I want you to understand, okay? So you do a fantastic job about that. I want you to keep working on Bear and really continue to work on that. Remember what we talked about in terms of your homework with, obviously, with the dry mechanics of going for prayer hands to butterfly to bear, and then as well working on just going straight up and straight down, kind of like how deGrom is in this video, right? So that's the very first thing. Second thing I want you to take a look of, right, is what we don't want to do is we don't want to get below this shoulder right here, right? Take a look at deGrom. deGrom gets his shoulder right above his elbow right above his shoulder, rather. Versus for you, we're well below our shoulder, right? And the one thing we don't want to do is we don't want to push, right? Because if we recall on Wednesday what we were talking about, there's a lot of stress that goes in to pitching, right? Obviously, it's a lot of stress on your arm, and the one thing we want to try to work on is alleviate as much as we can, right? So that's something that we're going to continue to work on, and we'll get into this week of how do we better, or rather the next time we meet, how do we better get into that position, okay? Another thing, too, I want you to take a look at real quick, Camden. I want you to take a look at deGrom's front hand versus your front hand, right? If you notice, deGrom has a really strong front hand, right? Think about it like a bow and arrow, right? Let's just say your arm is the bow, or rather your glove is the bow and the arrow is your arm, right? Wherever your glove goes, right, is going to be where that arrow is shot, right? So notice your glove is over here, right, which is going to probably cause that arrow to go towards your glove side, right? So that's one thing I want you to be conscious about whenever we're thinking about throwing, is that we really want to point that glove to our target, right? And obviously next time whenever we meet, we'll really kind of work in depth about that during our routine and our throwing program, is really making sure that we really extend that glove out to your target, right, and going towards home plate, okay? The last thing I really want to talk about, obviously there's a lot that we could talk about in this video, but obviously for your age, we're really just going to go into the basics, right? The last one I really want to talk about is with this front foot, we want it to continue to go forward, right? Notice how DeGrom's front foot doesn't go out, right? It goes straight at the pitcher, or rather straight at the batter, right? We want to make sure that we are able to take all of our momentum that we've built up, right, and take it right to home plate, right? So with that being said, right, one thing I want you to think about, if I were to draw a straight line, right, what I want is that you follow that straight line down. Notice you kind of deviate from that straight line, right? And that's why I love this camera angle that I get of my pitchers, is that it really can show us that straight line and where we are, right? So that's another thing I want you to continue to work on. And then I will say the one last thing, actually, I think this is a really good thing to point out. Take a look at where DeGrom finishes with his body versus where you finish with your body. Notice how DeGrom is much more at this angle, right? And for you, it's more straight up like this, right? So whenever we finish, we want to make sure that we are kind of finished above and out in front of ourselves, right? I know that's a lot to really explain over video, but obviously, Camden, we'll really talk about it next time. So I want you to take a look at this video, think about it a little bit more in depth, and then obviously whenever we get to our next lesson, we'll recap it and we'll kind of talk about the whys of why we need to do certain things and really the reason of how we're going to get there, rather the next steps that we need to continue to grow, Camden. So otherwise, man, great job this week. Continue to keep growing, man. And until next time, keep grinding, buddy.